Void Miner, Trial of the Century, Part 3. Chapter 11. Return to the Station. The widow coasted slow on approach, her patched hull gleaming faintly in reflected station light. Arg sat forward in the pilot's chair, shoulders hunched, eyes locked on the monitors. His hands gripped the armrest, not the controls. The ship was in an auto dock now, system syncing with the station's beacons, but old habits had his muscles tensed anyway. It felt wrong coming back here. Last time, he'd left the station buzzing with drills and questions, orphans filling corridors with noise and tension. They'd been loud, raw, barely holding together. Part of him expected the same chaos when he set foot inside again. He braced himself for it. Beside him, Kara sat in the co-pilot's chair, watching the approach. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, hands loosely clasped. Her eyes tracked the bulk of the station as it grew larger in the viewport. A mismatched sprawl of modules lashed together, patched with scrap and paint, alive with the faint glimmer of light on every corridor. She let out a quiet breath. "So this is it?" Art grunted. "Doesn't look like much," she added. "Wasn't," he said flatly. His jaw tightened as he watched the docking clamps extend. "Last time I left them, they were still trying to remember which end of a torch was which." Kara's lips twitched faintly, not quite a smile. "And you think that's still what you'll find?" "I've learned not to expect much." The widow shuddered gently as the clamps locked. The docking sequence completed with a hiss that vibrated through the hull. Systems pinged green across the console. "Docked," Arg muttered. He unbuckled, standing stiffly. Kara rose with him, hand brushing the edge of the console. "Then let's see what your orphans have done with themselves." Arg didn't answer. He didn't need to. The airlock opened with a metallic groan. Arg stepped through first, boots heavy on the grated deck of the station. He'd expected the same smell as before, metal and stale filters, coolant and burned wiring. It was there, but faint. The air tasted cleaner. Kara followed, her gaze sweeping every surface. Her expression tightened, not with disdain, but calculation, as though measuring what kind of life could take root here. Voices carried down the corridor. Not wild shouts, not the racket of kids at play, but sharp, ordered commands. Arg frowned. He walked towards the sound. The corridor opened onto the central bay, the wide space Arg had once used as a gathering point, half workshop, half training ground. He stopped in the doorway, Kara pulling up beside him. The bay wasn't chaos. It was order. Dozens of orphans moved in tight lines, running drills with tools, emergency masks, and mock repair panels. Two older kids barked instructions, their voices crisp. Smaller ones hurried to keep pace, movements stiff but determined. No one wandered, no one slacked. Kara's eyebrows lifted. Arg just stared. The noise wasn't gone. It was transformed. Shouts carried in rhythm, tools clattered in sequence, boots struck the deck in unison. The bay throbbed with the sound of purpose. Arg's throat tightened. He hadn't expected this. Not from them. Not from the kids, scraped raw by the belt, scarred and half feral. And yet, here they were. Kara leaned closer, voice low. "Looks like they've been busy." He didn't answer. Not yet. The drill played out in front of them. Two kids simulated a hull breach, slamming a panel shut while others rushed to reinforce with sealant. Another group ran hoses to a mock fire, coordinating in pairs. A young boy tripped, dropping his mask. Before Arg could react, one of the older girls hauled him upright, barked at him to stay sharp, and shoved him back in line. The rhythm never broke. Arg crossed his arms. His chest ached. But not from the trial this time. "Leadership," Kara murmured, watching the girl issue her orders. "Natural." Arg grunted. He knew the faces. Tio barked at the youngest to stay sharp. Ariel commanded with clipped precision, Kerr muttering curses but keeping his line steady. He knew them all. And now, they weren't just kids. They were crew. Not yet polished, not yet safe, but closer than he'd ever imagined. Kara's eyes softened as she watched. Her hand brushed her stomach absently, the gesture unconscious now. They're becoming something. Ark's jaw worked. Didn't think they'd stick to it. They didn't just stick it, she tilted her head, lips pressing together. They've taken it further than you thought possible. He didn't respond. His throat was too tight. One of the drills ended with a sharp whistle. The orphans froze, turning in unison toward the leader. Teo, sweat streaking his forehead, shoulders square. Reset, he barked, his voice cracked at the edges. But no one laughed, no one mocked. The younger ones scrambled to reset the bay, dragging panels, clearing hoses, realigning the tools. Carr glanced at Arg. You see it, don't you? Arg's eyes stayed locked on the floor. Yeah. They're not just surviving, her voice softened. They're becoming more. He swallowed hard. His chest felt heavier than Titan's gravity. When he first stepped into the station, he hadn't believed it could be saved. He'd only stayed because he couldn't walk away from kids left with nothing. He hadn't thought they'd turn into this. And yet, here they stood, lines forming, drills resetting, leaders rising. A crew in shadow. Not his crew, not exactly, but something close, something real. The whistle blew again. Teo turned, spotting Arg and Carr in the doorway. His eyes widened for half a heartbeat. Then he straightened, shoulders tightening. Arg? He called, voice rough. The others turned too. Some faces lit faintly, but others just stared. But none broke formation. Arg lifted his chin. Didn't wreck the place while I was gone? Teo's lips twitched. Not quite a smile. You trained us too well for that. Carr glanced at Arg, a faint smirk ghosting her lips. Looks like you've made more of a mark here than you wanted to. Arg grunted, but didn't deny it. For the first time in a long time, he let the weight on his shoulders ease, just slightly. They were scared. They were young. They were far from perfect. But they were on their way. And as Kara watched them with fresh eyes, Arg saw it too. The shadow of a crew. Chapter 12. Trade Secured. The echoes of the whistle still hung in the bay. Arg stood at the edge with Kara at his side, the orphans staring back in formation, sweat shining on young faces, tools still clutched in their hands. The discipline had stunned him, the rhythm of the drills, the sharp cadence of orders. They weren't the scattered children that he had left behind. But Arg could feel something else in the air, a tension not yet released. The way Teo's jaw was set, the way Ariel lingered at the console against the far wall, the younger ones shifting on their feet, eyes darting between him and Kara. They hadn't just been showing off drills. They'd been waiting for this moment. Kara felt it too. Her gaze swept the bay, sharp, calculating, but her lips pressed together in silence. She wasn't about to speak before the orphans did. Teo finally broke. He stepped forward, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his wrist, chin lifted. His voice cracked slightly at the start, but steadied fast. We've got something more to show you. Arg folded his arms, saying nothing. Ariel pushed off the wall, striding towards the side console. Fingers flew across the patched keys, and the display flickered to life. A thin blue projection stretched across the base center. Not station diagnostics, not drills. Manifests. Columns of neat figures scrolled upward, shipments cataloged, materials sorted by weight and type, destinations logged. Water, refined scrap, cleaned ore pulled from the station's recycler. Small but steady consignments, names of ships and docks marked, and in the margins, the destinations burned the brightest. Hub Station, Gilda Stone. Kara's breath caught audibly. Arg's stomach tightened. "You've been trading," Kara said, her voice low, disbelief showing in every word. Teo's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, more a grim acknowledgement. "Not begging, not scavenging, trading." Kerr stepped forward next, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes gleaming under messy hair. "Turns out folks pay good coin when you can guarantee delivery. Even better when you offer something they didn't expect we'd have." Ariel's chin lifted, her voice sharp. "We're providers now, not burdens." The younger ones behind them shifted, standing taller, faces lighting with pride that even exhaustion couldn't smother. Kara's eyes moved quickly, absorbing the data. Her hand brushed her stomach absently, a habit now, but her focus never broke from the manifests. "These aren't small exchanges. You've established routes, consistency. The guild doesn't open doors like this without a reason." "The reason was simple," Teo said. "We proved we could pull it off. No one gave it to us." His gaze slid to Arg, hard, defiant. "Not even you." The words landed heavy. Arg's jaw tightened. He didn't rise to it, because the truth was worse than defiance. They had done it without him. The bay quieted. All eyes were on him now, waiting for a word, a reaction, something. Arg kept his arms crossed, boots planted firm. His throat burned, but no words came. He looked at the scroll of manifest again, the steady columns of proof, the hub, the guild, supplies going out, not just in. He had drilled them for survival. They had turned survival into trade, and that meant something Arg hadn't prepared for. They didn't need him in the same way anymore. Kara turned slightly, studying his face. She said nothing, but the tilt of her brow told him she read the tension in her silence. A younger boy stepped forward from the ranks, maybe 12 at most. Dirt streaked across his cheek. His voice was small but clear. "We wanted you to see it, to know we're not just waiting for help anymore." Arg's chest ached. He let his arms drop, slow, heavy. "You've done good," he said, voice rough. Not loud, not eloquent, just truth. The boy's eyes widened. Teo's posture eased fractionally. Ariel gave a single sharp nod. Kerr muttered something under his breath that might have been approval, though it was buried under his usual scowl. The younger one straightened taller, as though the words themselves had weight. Kara finally spoke, her tone steady, carrying just enough warmth to fill the gap Arg left. "You've done more than good. You've built something lasting. The hub and the guild didn't commit to shadows, only to those they believe can hold. You've shown them you can." Her words lit the bay brighter than any manifest. The kids glanced at each other, pride flickering raw and unguarded. Arg stayed quiet, because pride wasn't all he felt. The bay dispersed slowly, groups peeling off into corridors, resetting drills, returning to tasks. Teo lingered, shoulders squared, expression tight but not hostile. "This station is ours now," he said, voice even. "We don't forget who started it, but we're the ones holding it now." Arg met his eyes. There was no challenge there, only the blunt truth of a leader in the making. He gave a single nod. "Then don't let it slip." Teo nodded back, then turned away, voice rising to bark new instructions at a pair of younger ones already slacking. The bay filled with noise again. Not chaos, but order. Kara stood at Arg's side, arms folded. Her gaze lingered on him, reading more than he wanted read. "You're proud," she said softly. "Yeah." His voice came flat. He swallowed. "Feels like hell." She didn't argue. She just stood with him in the quiet shadow of the bay, listening to the children he'd once thought lost command their station with the weight of something he hadn't expected. They weren't orphans anymore. They were a crew. And Arg knew, standing there, that meant letting go. Chapter 13. Kara's Report. The widow's systems were stable enough to stay docked, so Arg lingered on the station, wandering the corridors with his jaw set tight. Kara, though, carried herself differently. The trade reveal had struck her, not just as a surprise, but as proof. Proof that the belt could build itself into something more. But the children's pride wasn't the end of it. Kara still had a duty. She had promised the hub commander she would keep him informed, and the Guild of Stone had been as much her project as Arg's. She couldn't let the threads slacken now. So she found one of the patched comm rooms the orphans had rebuilt. Its consoles was jury-rigged from salvage, but the screen was steady, the signal strength good. The children had cleaned the place recently, filters humming, walls scrubbed down, faint smell of soap layered over the tang of metal. It looked less like a ruin now and more like a hub of its own. Kara eased into the chair, brushing hair back from her face. Her hand lingered for a moment on her stomach, an unconscious gesture she hardly noticed anymore. Then she keyed the line. Static crackled, lights flickered, then the screen steadied. The hub commander's face appeared. Sharp features, graying hair cropped close, eyes heavy but steady. His uniform jacket was rumpled, but the badge gleamed. Behind him, Kara glimpsed the bustle of the hub, officers moving, reports flowing, the endless hum of the station at the belt center. Kara Voss, he said, voice clipped but not unfriendly. I wasn't expecting a report this soon. Kara inclined her head. Circumstances move faster than I thought. His eyes narrowed, studying her. You're on the orphan's station. Yes, her voice was calm, steady. And I thought you should know what's become of it, she told him. Not every detail. Not about Titan, not about the seed, not about the second trial. That was between her and Arg. But she told him about the station, about the drills she had witnessed, the discipline that had surprised even Arg, about the manifests the children had revealed. Trade secured, she said plainly, with the hub, with the guild. They're not just surviving anymore, they're part of the belt's economy now. The commander didn't interrupt. He listened, eyes sharp, hands steepled on his desk. When she finished, he leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly. You sound impressed. Kara's lips pressed together. I am. A pause hung between them, the hum of the comm filling it. Then the commander leaned forward again. His voice was lower now, quieter. Since you've been gone, the Guild of Stone hasn't just held. It's thrived. Kara's breath caught faintly. The commander's gaze held hers. You laid the groundwork, but they've taken it further than any of us expected. Cohesion where there was none. Miners and haulers speaking with one voice. They've begun arbitration with independent operators, and EarthGov Stone is shifting. They see the Guild as inevitable now. Kara's throat tightened. She sat straighter, shoulders squared, but her hands curled in her lap. They don't need me anymore, she said softly. The commander's eyes narrowed, but not unkindly. You were never building it for them to need you. You were building it to last without you. The words cut sharper than she wanted to admit. After the call ended, Kara sat in silence for a long time. The screen flickered dark, reflecting her faintly. Tired eyes, pale face, lips pressed tight. The glow lingered in her pupils, the mark of the seed, a reminder that nothing was simple anymore. She felt displaced. The guild was thriving. The children were trading. The belt was shaping itself without her. She had always been at the center of the work, balancing fractions, stitching fragile bonds. Now she was watching from the outside. But beneath the ache, pride stirred. The guild was alive, stronger than ever, and the orphans had turned themselves into something more than dependents. Margaret said it felt like hell to be proud and cut away at the same time. She understood now. She rose slowly, her hand brushing her stomach again. The child stirred faintly inside her, not the wrongness of Titan's aftermath, but the simple reminder of life. The belt didn't need her daily anymore, but maybe that meant she could build something else, something no less lasting. She stepped back into the corridor, the hum of the station surrounding her. Arg was waiting somewhere, silent as ever. Kara let out a slow breath. The Guild of Stone didn't need her, but she was proud all the same. Chapter 14. Legacies Accepted. The station never really slept. Even in the quiet hours, there was always motion. Boots on the deck, the hiss of recyclers, voices echoing faintly through the narrow corridors. Arg had lived with that sound long enough to know it, but now it was different. It wasn't desperation. It was a rhythm. Arg leaned against a bulkhead, arms crossed, watching a pair of young ones lug scrap down the hall. They weren't stumbling. They weren't bickering. They moved with purpose, passing nods to one another as they worked. Their tools were strapped proper, gear checked, routines ingrained. He let out a breath through his nose. This wasn't his doing anymore. Not really. When he'd first come here, the orphans had been a mess. Scared, angry, barely keeping systems alive. He had pushed them, drilled them, barked until his throat ached. He had forced them into line because no one else would. And somehow, in the time he'd been gone, they'd taken that spark and turned it into something more. They were leading themselves now. He should have felt relief, and part of him did. But another part, a heavier part, twisted with loss. They didn't need him the same way anymore. Kara found him there, still leaning against the wall. Her steps were lighter than his, but she carried her own weight, the weight of what she had learned in her calm with the hub. She stepped beside him, shoulders brushing the bulkhead. "They've come far," she said quietly. Arg grunted. Kara studied the passing children, the steady pace, the quiet efficiency. Her lips pressed together, then softened. "I spoke with the commander." Arg turned his head slightly, not fully. "And?" "The guild is thriving," Kara replied. Her voice was steady, but he caught the edge beneath it. "Stronger than ever. They've taken what we've started and run with it. Deals, arbitration, even EarthGov is paying attention." Arg exhaled slow, heavy. "So they don't need you?" Her jaw flexed. "No, not daily." The words hung, raw, between them. She had poured herself into the guild, held meetings in stale-lit rooms, argued with stubborn foremen, bridged gaps between miners and haulers who'd rather spit than speak. And now it didn't need her anymore. Arg shifted his weight, eyes following another pair of orphans crossing the hall with sealed containers. Their voices were low, focused, not the sound of children, not entirely. "I guess that's the point," he muttered. Kara's brow arched faintly. "We built something that doesn't fall apart when we step away," he said, his voice rough. "That's the whole damned point." Kara let out a slow breath. "It still feels like losing something." He gave a grunt that might have been agreement. They walked together, winding through the station's corridors. Everywhere they went, the signs were there. Order where chaos had been, pride where fear once lingered. The orphans nodded to them, but they didn't pause their work. They weren't orbiting Arg anymore. They weren't hanging on Kara's words. They had their own orbit now. The guild had its own orbit, too. Arg saw it in the bay, the drills running like clockwork. Kara saw it in the manifests, the signatures of trade agreements. Both felt it in the air itself. Stability, not just survival. It was harder to accept than either had thought. Kara finally broke the silence as they stepped into the widow's docking bay, the ship looming in patched steel and stubborn resilience. "Maybe this is what legacy feels like," she said quietly. Arg frowned. "You build, you bleed, you fight to hold something together," she continued. "And then one day you realize it's not yours anymore. It belongs to them, to the ones who came after." Her hand brushed her stomach absently. Arg's chest tightened at the gesture. He looked back towards the station corridors, the faint sound of drills echoing even here. "I never thought I'd care about leaving anything behind." "And now?" Kara asked. He grunted, jaw working. "Now I don't get a choice." They stood there together, the widow humming faintly, the station alive around them. It wasn't theirs anymore. Not the guild, not the orphans. But it was lasting. And for two people who had lived too long with nothing but loss, that was something close to peace. Later, Arg sat on the widow's bridge, staring out at the station through the viewport. The patched modules glowed faintly against the belt's darkness. He thought of drills in the bay, trade manifests, a guild growing stronger without its founders. He thought of letting go. His fists curled against the armrest, then slowly loosened. Kara's words lingered. Maybe this is what legacy feels like. For the first time, he didn't argue. Chapter 15. The Call Returns. The orphan's station fell away into shadow. The widow's drives rumbled low as she eased clear of the last stalking tether, her patched hull groaning like an old joint under strain. Through the viewport, the station's sprawl of welded modules glowed faintly in the black, lights alive across every corridor. Arg watched it shrink behind them, jaw set. He hadn't said much when they undocked. He never did at moments like this. But something in the back of his chest tugged as the station slipped from view. It wasn't his anymore. Not really. But leaving it still felt wrong. Beside him, Kara shifted into the co-pilot's chair. She lowered herself carefully, hand braced on the console, breath steady. The weight she carried was heavy now, visible, undeniable. But she met his silence without comment. Together, they faced the black. And the black answered. The first pulse had been faint, back on the station. Enough to make them look at each other, to know the seed wasn't finished. Now in the silence of space, it wasn't faint anymore. It pressed through the hull like a second heartbeat, low and relentless. The widow's deck shivered with it. The lights above flickered once, twice, then steadied again, systems catching themselves. Arg's fingers tightened on the controls. There it is again. Kara didn't argue. Her hand shifted across her stomach, as though to shield the life inside from the resonance rattling through the ship. Her eyes narrowed, glowing faintly as she stared at the readouts flickering in front of her. "It's stronger," she said quietly. The fragments pulsed again from their cradle below, sharp enough this time to send a shiver down Arg's spine. The console stuttered. Navigation blinked red, then steadied. Life support cycled harsh, hissing louder than it should. Arg slammed a fist against the side panel, as if brute force could cow the widow into holding steady. "It's eating through every system we've got." Another pulse followed. This one didn't fade. It lingered, a hum so low it rattled the fillings in his teeth. Kara closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. The glow sharp now. "It's not testing anymore. It's pulling." The widow lurched, guidance systems buckling against Arg's grip. He held the controls hard, muscles straining in his forearms. The old ship groaned, stabilizers whining as they bled off the interference. The fragments in the cargo crate weren't passive. They pulsed with intent, synchronized, like a call and response Arg couldn't hear but felt in his bones. Kara gritted her teeth, bracing herself with one hand against the console, her other hand pressed hard against her belly, steadying as the resonance seemed to echo through her body. Arg's jaw clenched. He didn't want to look at her, but he couldn't not. The way her shoulders squared, The way she refused to flinch, even as sweat shone at her temples, it twisted his gut. The seed had no mercy for timing, no mercy for what she carried. Another flicker raced across the console. Comms snapped to life unbidden, spitting static across the bridge. Arg cut them down with a slap of his palm. "This isn't interference anymore," he growled. "It's steering." Kara nodded once, her breath measured. "It won't stop until we follow." The pulses grew steadier, less like shocks now and more like rhythm. Consistent, insistent. The widow trembled with it, every rivet in her frame humming like a string pulled taut. Ark's knuckles went white on the controls. He didn't yield. He held the widow steady, fighting her every lurch. But deep down, he knew. This wasn't just a warning. It was direction. The seed wasn't waiting. It was calling. And soon they would have to answer. Arg sat back finally, shoulders rigid, breath shallow. He let the widow hum beneath him, systems flickering, fragments throbbing like a pulse under the skin. Kara leaned into her seat, her eyes half closed but steady. She looked toward him, her voice low. "It's begun again." He didn't respond, not with words, because she was right. The quiet month was over. The call had returned. The end of Part 3 of Void Miner, Trial of the Century.